Hi everyone, it's Ren here, and I'm welcoming you to a new installment of the Open Monism series that I'm kind of starting to accelerate on again a little bit. I had taken a bit of a break for a week or something to sort of gather my thoughts and allow people to have a bit of a breather. But now that I started discussing open metaphysics, I kind of want to get the ball rolling for a while things are still kind of fresh in my mind. So in this new video, which is the fourth episode of the Open Monism series, I'll continue talking about open metaphysics. So fourth episode of the Open Monism series and second episode on open metaphysics. And as you know, as I said in my previous video, I will be taking my time. I decided that I would be taking my time, even if that means producing a lot of different episodes, cut up in 10-minute videos. Hopefully, that's the ideal. Doesn't matter how many episodes I end up producing, so long as I cover the basics of open monism. So open metaphysics, I don't know if you remember, but last time we talked, I concluded with the idea that open groundedness was the body of being. And I kind of, I aimed for like a little bit of a cliffhanger or something to get your mouth watering for the next episode. So maybe I can sort of return to that question and to that asseveration on my part. What did I mean by that? And you'll notice that in my writing, if you have already paid attention or read my writing before, I'd often say something and then like a few pages later, but what did I mean by that? And it's not that I'm like fascinating myself all of a sudden with like what I said. It's just how my mind works. It's just a bit weird, but that's how it is. And it's where I feel most comfortable, like kind of thinking and expressing my thinking so that I can progress. And I do that in my videos as well. So again, this kind of stream of consciousness, it's how I unpack my insights and try to, sort of get something concrete and tangible out of them. And since I'm talking about tangible, the thing about being, which I described in my last video as the real object, which is not an object of metaphysics, which was kind of uncovered or recovered by Martin Heidegger, having said that the history of philosophy since the pre-Socratics or since Plato had been one of forgetting about being and confusing it with substance or with like fundaments of reality. The thing about being is that it is slippery. I define it as a slippery concept in my notes. You will have noticed that before if you've read my notes before. And here I think what I'll do is I'll try to explain what I mean by slippery, by mystical, by what's complicated about being. Even though what's uncomplicated in my opinion is that Heidegger is right. Being is what metaphysics deals with ultimately, but it is not a tool in metaphysics. It is not even a subject of research. It is a subject of research, but it's not a subject of empirical research. It's more like this thing that you're trying to grasp, you're trying to grip it, but it's kind of always slipping from your hands. But in the process of trying to get closer to it, getting a fuller grasp of it, you cover a lot of ground and you develop a system that way. So that's what Heidegger attempted to do in Being and Time, particularly, and what I'm trying to do, I guess, in whatever the title of whatever work that comes out of my notes will be. Hopefully, fingers crossed, that will happen. But I want to dedicate my life to it in many ways, so I'm sure it will, if I live long enough. So being is slippery. What I mean by this is that if you start, being a metaphysician and thinking about being, what you'll notice is that it seems both very overwhelming and like ever present everywhere, and at the same time impossible to really capture, precisely because it is everything in a way. So for example, if you were to try to think about how to define being, so you could try to say, well, okay, being is such that it conditions everything, right? So for example, the existence of that book, which is a great book by the way, is conditioned by being. I'm conditioned by being. Everything is kind of conditioned by being. Mathematics, existence, everything. Insofar as they are conditioned by being. Right? You might say that. And at the same time, I think you're noticing that with me here, it doesn't seem to fit, because being is not really like a condition or a precondition of things. It's something else. It's something bigger. It's something more fundamental, at the same time more light, more transparent. You know, it's something that does not quite fit as a condition. It's not like you've got, say, like the form, say like the abstract form of this, in Aristotelian terms, for example, like you've got the abstract form, which needs being as a condition for the abstract form of this to become the actual tangible book. So it's not like being is what makes an intangible form tangible. Being is not like this thing you add. Being is everything. Okay, so a condition is not suited here. I think the concept of condition. You might say, well, another thing that you often hear, and sometimes in an attempt to talk about being, I have to resort to it because I need to find ways to still refer to it in understandable, legible language. Well, you might think being is such that it inheres in everything. So you might say, well, okay, so it's not a condition, it's more than that. So actually, in everything that is, it's not like a question of conditions, but in everything that is, being inheres in this. You got a really nice bottle of water here. Beer, not beer. I don't drink beer, actually. I used to. I don't anymore. But maybe my mind is obsessed with the idea of drinking beer because I'm kind of like cutting myself off it. Anyway, so being inheres in the bottle of water, not beer. Being inheres in me, being inheres in everything that is. Is that better than like being conditions everything? Well, honestly, you're probably thinking, like myself now, that actually maybe it's a tiny bit better, but it's still not quite the deal. It's not quite what we're looking for here. And that is because, you know, if you were to say being inheres in everything, you're sort of presupposing that like there is a thing and that's actually being inheres in it. A little bit like, you know, if you were to think about a human being, for example, you might say, well, actually a human heart inheres in a human body. And that is strange. Like it would be weird to say a heart inheres in a human being. You might say, well, a mind inheres in a human being, for example. But like you can sort of conceive of a human being and then the mind being a part of the human being, even though it's not like just a part that you add to it. It's more like a sort of very integral sort of elements that defines a human being. Still, like, you know, it sort of makes sense, and you could say a mind inheres in a human being, but being is not like a part, it's not something that inheres in that sense, even if it's like a universal kind of form of inhering. Being is more than that, because being encompasses everything. Being, there's no such thing that being inheres in, or that being conditions, because being in a way is the condition of the conditioning, you know. So it's impossible to talk. It's possible to talk about it, but almost always as as an attempt to sort of get closer to how we could capture it. And we use words, we use analogies. Well, we philosophers or philosophizing people, we try to use analogies to just get to the meaning of being, knowing that the meaning of it is more in the search almost than in the result of the search, because there is no result of the search. The search is constant, it's continuous, you know, and is actually part of the human quest for meaning, I think. And that's why actually in my writing at some point I say that being is a labyrinth. And it's like being in a labyrinth, like in a maze, and there's like a treasure in the middle, right? But you can actually never really get to the treasure, and like, or you could get to it, you know, it doesn't really matter in the end. But what being is not the treasure, because it slips from the treasure itself. It's more like the movement through the labyrinth, from where you are to the treasure, or through, you know, to your failed attempt perhaps. at finding the treasure. Still, in your attempts at finding it, you've uncovered something about being. You're not, like, you cannot encompass being as a whole, because being is the whole. So you cannot encompass what encompasses you, if you like. It's the essential principle that to be derived from it here. But you're going through the labyrinth, and what I add to my metaphor, which I think Ronya, the forum member Ronya, enjoyed. So thanks Ronya for telling me you enjoyed it, because I'm quite proud of that analogy. Actually, I'm saying that, like, being is being in the labyrinth, and that there are, like, words all written on the walls of the labyrinth to illustrate the fact that language is a key in that quest. And the reason why language is a key in that quest for the constant uncovering of the meaning of being is something that I will cover in another video. Actually, I almost have to finish talking here. So how is all that relevant to open monism? Well, when I say open groundedness is the body of being, and I'll finish with that actually, what I mean is that being is slippery, and the way that I think I can fix being, sort of almost as if it were like a kind of a representation, it's a representation of being, you know, is the concept of open groundedness. So I'm not saying that open groundedness is actually being, although often in my notes I almost sounds as if being and open groundedness are the same. When I say that open groundedness is not being, is the body of being, it's a little bit like, imagine that, you know, you have a person, but you only see their body. So you can't really say know the person, but you can still have like a sort of experience of what the person is like. Sometimes bodily traits, you might see things that might tell you, reveal aspects of the person. And in fact, I always talk about aspects of being. I say that open groundedness is the body of being. It's almost like, sure, being is fleeting and slippery, you cannot quite capture it, but you can kind of still see its body, and you can talk about its body. And the vision that I've had of the body of being is of open groundedness. And the advantage of open groundedness over being, in a sense, is that it can be talked about in great detail because it's a body, and therefore it can be described and it can be captured. And I say that insofar as being can be talked about, it is under the aspect, or under its body as open groundedness. And I'll explain in a later video why I think that this is justified, and then I'll enter into a fuller description of open groundedness as what is in the universe, in reality, what is insofar as it can be talked about as a body of being. See you soon, guys. I hope you enjoyed this.